lot to get to today on the pod because the schedule is different this week, Tuesday, Friday. Then we're back to Monday, Wednesday, Friday throughout, the next 6 months or so. So buckle up and we're ready to do that. We'll have NFL predictions on Friday's pod, but we'll do some NFL today with Brock Purdy, the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, on his career and where he's at now. Also, the trade value column and top 5 at every position with Sheil Kapadia, something we do every single year. I'm going to recap college football, the highs essentially and some lows from the first week, and also in attendance for USC's nice win against LSU. We've got life advice. So a full weekend of college football, and I'm going to run through the stuff that I thought was the biggest from all of that and made it back to Vegas for USC's impressive win, late win against LSU. So the biggest buildup was probably Notre Dame going to Texas A&M in this one. And if you go over the course of this game, this was an ugly but also beautiful football game because it was hard. And I remember, I don't think it might have been last season, maybe it was 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago now that I think about it, where there was this game where I just was thinking about football and I was thinking about the interactions and the stuff that happens on the sideline, how hard this sport can be, because there's all these moments throughout the course of 3.5 hours where you feel like, is anything going to work out? And you have to stay in the game mentally. That's why coaches drive themselves crazy, because it's just like, if you could execute the messaging here, we would still have a chance to win. So if you look at Notre Dame, it's 6-6 at the half. They've got the ball. They go for it on 4th and 1 at their own 33, right? They get the first down. They go for it on 4th and 2 at their own 49. I thought Riley Leonard got the first down. There's certainly screen grabs that would tell you that. They reviewed it. Wasn't the case. It's a turnover on downs, but they're not able to get Texas A&M to essentially do the same thing. So Notre Dame avoids the momentum swing loss of the game in that spot. Notre Dame scores a touchdown, makes it 13-6. They force a punt. Notre Dame punts. And then A&M scores to make it 13 apiece. And in the next possession, Notre Dame gets their 11th penalty, where at that point, I think it was a total of 99 yards. I can double check this to see how many penalties ultimately they had. Yeah, 11 for 99 is what they ended up having in the game. The crowd is going crazy. The broadcast crew is just so great. Herb Stringfeller is just so great at telling you the story of the game as it develops. And as I'm watching that moment, I'm thinking, is this where the momentum causes Notre Dame to lose this football game? And it wasn't the case. So if you look at the overall stats from either Riley Leonard or Wigman, you're not going to be blown away by any of this stuff. Riley was 18 of 30. He actually ran the ball a bunch of times too, so it was pretty sturdy on the ground. And A&M, Wigman's numbers 12 of 30, the 2 brutal picks that he had in this. You actually probably felt good about where A&M was. But I look at this game as just like one of those toughness moments. And it could be the toughest game Notre Dame has all season long. If you look at their remaining opponents, the only team that would be ranked would be number 10 Florida State. But after their second loss to BC this weekend, after opening with the loss against Georgia Tech, they've dropped out of the rankings altogether. So that, as it stands right now, is the only team that projects to be ranked other than, USC, who they'd finished at the Coliseum, and SC moving up from a preseason number 23 ranking with their big win. So, look, was Riley Leonard great? No. I know with Wigman being on the radar of somebody that could potentially be a top draft pick, and the recruiting profile and everything that's gone with him, it was a bad game, but I don't look at it as he was terrible and Leonard were terrible. I just thought this was a tough football game where there was going to be all of these moments that we saw where nothing looked good. You didn't know who was going to win. You didn't know if A&M could figure out any way to block enough to get the ball going on the ground. Notre Dame's corners may have been the story of this game overall, but I think it's 2 teams. Clearly Notre Dame feels better because of the win. But I'd be shocked if we look at the rest of A&M's run here. If they're not, they probably are going to get to 4-1. Like, I didn't leave that going, A&M has all of these problems. It's not a talented football team. Remember the recruiting stuff from 2 years ago where, I don't know, was it like 10 of the top 80 recruits? There's a couple of headliners that have left, but more of those guys stuck around College Station than I think anybody would realize unless you went back and dug into the whole thing. So if I could say one sentence about Notre Dame's win at A&M, it would be that it was just whoever was going to win that game, I was going to be incredibly impressed with their resiliency, with their toughness, and having all of these ups and downs emotionally where you would think a group might completely give up. So credit to Notre Dame in that spot at 13-13. I'm like, this might be it. And it was not the case. They put up 10 more points to get the win. Miami. How about this stat? So they've had 0 quarterbacks drafted in the first 3 rounds since 1990. QBU, not exactly pumping out the quarterbacks. Brad Kaya, I believe, is the only Miami Hurricanes quarterback drafted in the last 20 years. Prior to that, I think you could go all the way back to Ken Dorsey. I don't know who Cam Ward is as far as a pro prospect. It doesn't matter because it's very clear with him transferring in after starting at a lower level and then last year at Washington State that he provides something that Miami has not had in a really long time. And whether it's Restrepo, who just feels like this constant, like whatever you need, he makes the right decision. He runs the perfect route. We could talk about Arroyo and the other guy that's been around for like 9 years. There's some dudes that I could just list and say, okay, this is really impressive. But the most important thing is that it's Cam Ward, who, by the way, at times, like I would be watching one game on one TV and then I wouldn't have the audio feed up for Miami, Florida. And I would think the play was blown dead, but it was just that Cam Ward was just, whatever. He'd be like 10 yards from the sideline and just sauntering out. There were so many times I thought maybe the whistle had been blown and then I'd rewind the play and be like, that's just how calm he is. Now, with the calmness, it almost at times can look a little too calm, right? A little too lackadaisical. The pick where he threw it back against the field is a bad pick, but you can't start nitpicking that stuff, especially when you're Miami and you forever had this run of going, we think we might have the guy, but do we really have the guy? And after just 1 week, I think it's very clear that Miami has a guy. The rest of their schedule, you want to start playing this game too. The only team that would be projected to be ranked before the season even started again was Florida State. And they dropped out, so they don't have the SC thing that I mentioned there with Notre Dame. Miami has a very favorable schedule the rest of the way. On the other side, the Florida part of this was so bad that it felt like Florida fans, with potentially the toughest single season in college football, depending on some of the projections you would look at, that they were already over this, Googling buyout numbers. One of the players tweeted out, I believe, something from a live story that said, F this team. It's kind of crazy too. And those of you that are parents would understand this better than I would. And I don't know if this is happening with you, but I think we see it. And I'm not really even blaming anybody. It's just the evolution of how people want to be heard. But we will now have this generation that feels like anytime they feel something, it doesn't mean every single one of them, but many will feel like, well, if I feel something, I need to share that I feel this way. And I despise, especially after a tough game, you decided to make it about you and then posting something. I hope that thing wasn't real, but it looked like it was fairly real. So who knows, maybe a couple days later we'll find out that it wasn't the case. But it's just really frustrating. It just makes everybody's jobs that much harder, even though you can understand in that moment massive disappointment. You lost the opening game, maybe to the best team in the ACC, but with the rest of Florida's schedule, the way that lines up, it's probably going to be a lot of tough Saturdays. Penn State, it was one simple question. Is it going to look like an offense that can actually compete against the top teams? I thought it looked great. I know Aller was only 11-17, but he hit on multiple big plays. He ran it 16 times. Prabula, who they're lining up at quarterback, the backup number 9. I'm like, are you guys just doing this to look different, or is there actually purpose behind it? And I was watching. I kind of got into it. I did a lot of Penn State stuff after the game and was watching some of the people just in their media access talk about like what it meant to them. And hey, look, we haven't showed you everything. And the new offensive coordinator, which was like the overriding theme of the broadcast there. Again, this game got weird because the weather delay took forever there. I have to imagine Penn State fans are elated just that it looks different. And then on top of everything else, Tez Wallace, a wide receiver, who Bruce Feldman had mentioned, 5 catches, 117. Maybe the most important thing, actually, is I'm just kind of like rambling through all my different notes and thoughts on this game, is that, okay, one, we have to accept that maybe West Virginia's decent. Okay, week 1, we think they might be decent. The same assumptions I'm making about A&M here. I don't know what's going to happen with Florida because they could still be okay, but just have an awful record. But West Virginia comes off 9-win season last year. I think 8 returning starters on offense, 5 on defense. So I think the number I had was 13 returning players from a 9-4 team. I know they're down a D tackle, one of the linebackers, one of the receivers. But I think we have to assume that like West Virginia, even when Penn State beat West Virginia last year, and I watched that game, I'm like, I thought West Virginia looks like they're a decent team. So if we are still right about that, I think Penn State looking this dominant and looking this different and beyond just all the different looks, that Aller looked confident again. Okay. really confident because I thought that was somebody whose confidence had been shattered at the end of last season. So I felt great, not because of the stats, because the Aller numbers aren't overwhelming. That's not what we'd be banging the drum on here with the headline. I just think that it's supposed to look more like a modern offense where if you don't feel like you have all of the talent at all the pass catching positions, at least find a way to just get these guys involved, like make their lives a little bit easier, make it easier on your quarterback. And I think that's the case. And I know Tyler Warren's been there forever. It's never had like a huge statistical season, number 44 at tight end, but like he even was out there, doing some stuff. So look, I think everybody should feel good that the first game with Penn State on offense looked like a team that is going to be tougher to defend. And if Aller is back to matching the confidence that he had when he probably showed up on campus after, I just thought it got so ugly for him last year. And I was like, I felt bad for the guy. All right. I was in attendance for USC's win against LSU. Look, SC, where do we start with this? Their quarterback, Miller Moss, is tough. That kid is tough. He spread the ball all over the field, whether it's Branch, Hudson, some of the other play callers. But if you're looking at it from the LSU standpoint and you knew that the number one priority would be, is the defense going to be any better? They're looking at it like, okay, well, even with Moss and all of these receivers, USC's held to 13 points going into the fourth quarter. So can the LSU defense actually be that bad after ranking, 109th last season? But I think the problem is if you look at it from an LSU side of it, like the corners just couldn't hold up. It was also interesting that Kelly felt like the team, once they had scored, started acting like the game was over and that they had won. So I think it's just a great win for SC. In this one, LSU's now lost every season opener since the title run in 2019. So 5 straight years they've lost this one. I was there again in person, so I didn't have like the same read on it. As far as Vegas itself, getting off the plane, walking around, going to the pregame stuff, it felt like LSU had taken over multiple casinos. And then you got into the stadium, and it's a great stadium. It's a really great place to see a football game. I was there for the Pro Bowl, did not stay for the second half. But it was probably 60-40. Like it felt overwhelming walking around. I'm like, man, this place is going to be all LSU. And in fact, it wasn't. LSU, Nussmeier is going to be good. Like this is another one of those results where I look at it and go, I think both these teams are going to be pretty good. But a huge win for SC. The SEC non-conference stuff, not great to start the year. And even if the LSU defense is better, it's being better from terrible. And I still think those corners had some issues there when they needed to make plays towards the end. And SC capitalized on everything that LSU couldn't do. Like when they needed to stop the most, they couldn't do it. They had a couple late penalties, which were stupid. But yeah, I kind of left there going, maybe it's a coin toss game, but SC won it. We'll see what happens with LSU's defense the rest of the way. But I'm not worried about Nussmeier, especially Lacey, the number one receiver option. I still think they're going to be fine. All right. The most impressive thing from everything we saw this weekend was Georgia. 34-3 over Clemson. It was 6-0 at the half. They outscore Clemson 28-3 in the second half. Now, Clemson, unfortunately for you Clemson fans, you fall into this not taking any transfer label because everybody that's going to be on TV or is going to be on a podcast or radio or whatever, they're going to look at Clemson. And because we all have something that's we can put a label on, well, Dabo doesn't want transfers. If you're transferring, there's a reason that you're transferring. Well, they took 0 in this year and they had 12 out. I went through it and I believe this is right, but I think Clemson's the only school in any of the Power 4 programs that took in 0. And this has been an ongoing thing. And because when you lose the same as everybody else, you just lose. When you lose differently, it's even worse. And in this case, we could point to the not taking in transfers for this declining Clemson product that we've seen the last couple of years. But the bigger issue, I think, is what's going on with the development or lack of development of the quarterbacks, whether it's Uyunglele transferring out now at Florida State, which doesn't look like he's necessarily killing it. And then you got Cade Klubnik, who was one of these top recruits. And, the overall stats last year, you could pick to some of it, but you just expected it to be a little bit better based on his profile. And I remember, again, being back to one of the most rewarding experiences going to that Elite 11 camp and talking to guys about different players. Like, what do you think of this guy, that guy? And there were multiple people who were like, yeah, Klubnik's really good. But I don't know. Clemson just feels like it's a little outdated. That might be the bigger story, but it's so much easier for all of us that have this job to point to this one defining trait that's unlike everybody else is that they're not taking transfers in. And the reality may be this, is that Georgia is the nastiest team in college football and Clemson will be fine in the ACC, but they got destroyed by a team that has all of these playmakers, maybe the number one pick at quarterback. The defensive thing seems to have reloaded. They have another kid named Cash Jones on CBS this fall. Justice has a price. There's just a lot of different guys from Georgia to pick through again, which makes a lot of sense. So Clemson, it feels a little bit like the Florida outcome. It's like, okay, it was bad, and now you're mad about all these things, and it's more than just a one-loss piece of math where it's like, what the hell is wrong with our program? Clemson the lesson in this could be that Clemson just might not be as good as Georgia. And there also could be a warning that no one's going to be as good as Georgia. Let's see a month of football before we start doing all that kind of stuff. But it's not the most outrageous observation post week one of college football. Maybe Georgia actually is that team again. I mean, if that ends up being the story at the end of the year, I don't think any of us are necessarily going to sit here and be surprised by it. But Clemson in the only one game is being judged against that. And they have this one defining trait that we can all be super critical of and then say that is the specific reason that they're losing all these football games, which isn't, I don't think, entirely fair. A couple notes. Oregon, they outscored Idaho 487, or excuse me, outgained them. 487 points. I probably would have led with that. 487 to 217 yards. They held Idaho to 2 of 12 on third down. Oregon ran like 30 more plays. I think they ran 87 plays in this game. And the 2 touchdowns for Idaho were 2 trick TDs. But this was a game. And if there was one alarming part of this, even though Idaho is preseason 7 in the FCS, and I looked at the FCS rankings again because I was like, do they drop teams that make the jump up and play, in my opinion, a title contender in Oregon? They stayed at 7. They did not drop. Number 1 and 2, I think FCS schools in the rankings also lost, but they don't move them down either. So the Oregon not being able to contain some of the edge pressure from Idaho, probably one of the most damning things that you could see from any of the contenders. And I want to end on Arizona on Saturday night. I was not alone on this in saying that Fafita McMillan is my favorite quarterback receiver combination in all of college football. Tetaroa ended up with 10 for 304 and 4 touchdowns. I think he had 199 at the half. But you have to check out my man, Tyler Loop, the senior kicker out of Lucas, Texas, who's now been in Arizona 5 years. This guy hits absolute bombs. Like you thought something was wrong with the camera angle. I don't know that you're going to stay up until 1 a.m. Eastern time to watch an Arizona kicker, but there's worse ways to spend your Saturday if you have the time. He is the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. He's here on behalf of Applebee's, the official grill and bar partner of the NFL. It's Brock Purdy. Thanks for doing this, man. How are you?
Doing great, guys. Thanks for having me, and excited to be on Team Applebee's, man. So let's go.
Yeah, we're going to get to some of the Applebee's stuff and the boneless special they have going on. I know you're working with some of the other guys in the NFL on that. But what's the offseason been like for you?
Yeah, man, it's been good. Just, last year came off the UCL injury and was all my focus and time and effort was on getting healthy for the season, game 1. And so, this year being able to, obviously make it through the season healthy and have an off season to, work on my body just with my hips and my arm and just mobility in general and becoming more of, just a better athlete, just training in that regard. And then mentally being able to look at stuff on film and be real with myself and take it to the field and actually work on, my fundamentals and everything. So it's been a real off season. It's been great. And I feel like I have truly gotten better. So
what is an off season like now once your life changes? I don't know what home is like for you, but do you notice it? Like, I mean, you have to notice it. There have to be things that are different, but what is different about being Brock Purdy now a couple years in the league?
Man, I think for, my wife and I, we got married and then going and training in another state, not really having like a true home base yet for us. So, we go to Florida and we train and do everything there for a month or so, and then fly back to California and go after it with the OTAs. And then, our 40 days off comes around in June, July. So then we fly back to Florida and train and it's just a lot of bouncing back and forth between places and then going and doing like, marketing and some commercials and stuff to, sort of help out, just provide for, what we have with our life. And so that's sort of what's been different than any other, off season that I've had growing up. But, we're learning and we're, trying to enjoy it and and take it all in. But it's a grind, man. Just in terms of being a NFL quarterback, you're always got to find ways to have that chip on your shoulder and get better, both mentally and physically. And nothing's ever given to, so you have to go earn it every day. And so more than anything, it's a grind. But you got to love it. You got to cherish every moment of it.
So you start the season, and clearly, you're one of the top Super Bowl favorites. To get back there. I don't know if I know how to perfectly ask this question, but like, you're in camp, you're good. You're all really good. You're obviously disappointed by the way season ends last year. But what is the attitude like? What is it like for you and the teammates, like knowing that we really only have one goal here as you start the season?
Yeah, man. Obviously, that's the big goal, is to win a Super Bowl and go all the way and finish it. That's every team's goal. But for us, it's trying to be the best version of ourselves, every day, every game, and going out and proving and showing to the world like what we're capable of. And we know that we have a good team, a good roster. We've experienced NFC championships, Super Bowls, like being in those moments. And for us, it's trying to come in every day and enjoy the process of getting there, not just trying to get there and shortcut it, but enjoying, the grind of it, the meetings, the having to go lift after practice, and then, joking around with guys in the locker room. It's like enjoying all those things and where we're at in our life, and then going out on Sunday and leaving everything that we have out there on the field every week, and then getting healthy and rehabbing and doing it all over again. Like, it's a grind, but man, if we can obviously get to the end and accomplish it and finish it, like, it's so worth it. So,
how bad did you want to leave Vegas after the Super Bowl last year?
Yeah, pretty quickly. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't. No one wanted to stay around. We lost the game, and it's like, dang, So for us, we want to get back on the plane and just sort of move on. Like, we wanted to process it and everything, yes, but it was hard to, because you just put in all this work over the last however many months just to get to that moment, and then sort of be heartbroken about it. So yeah, we all want to get on that flight home and get home.
A more positive thing. I was watching your Steve Young interview. You sit down with Steve, and I think about like being the Niners quarterback, right? I mean, this is an incredible tradition. Guys like Montana. What is it like for you to have these legends talk to you in a way that almost nobody else understands the responsibility of the way they do?
It's pretty special, man. I'm not gonna lie. You talk to these guys and Steve, and they're like, this is how we did it, and this is the standard, and they can relate to being in these shoes with just the weight of this organization and the history that this organization has, and the Super Bowls and all of it. But it's pretty cool talking to Steve, because he understands like actually being in the pocket, going through reads, when to run, when not to, processing plays and concepts and coverages. Like, it's pretty cool talking to him, man. And the way he breaks it down, you can just see and feel his wisdom. It's like, all right, like, this guy's definitely been through it, and he can relate to me, and it's pretty cool. But like I said, man, like, there's a standard here at quarterback. I feel like, with John Brody to Joe Montana to Steve Young, Garcia, Alex Smith, like, there's guys that have been here, man, that have had real success, and for them to come back and be able to talk to me, I'm like, dude, this is crazy. So I try to soak in everything that they say as much as I can whenever they're around.
I worked with Steve at ESPN for a long time, and we usually have him on a couple times a season. After he got done talking about quarterbacking, I'd be like, "Do I not understand anything about this position?" I mean, he's obviously very passionate about it, but he sees things in a way that I mean, I would never understand. And actually, I think this relates to Shanahan too. Can you explain to us that don't, like, most of us don't understand? Like, it's always one of my favorite things about football is we spend all this time talking about it. It's like, yeah, but we don't know like what the read was. We don't know what the protection was. We don't know what the option was and all these different things. How do you explain what it is that Shanahan does that the rest of us can understand it?
I think, for the most part, his offense, everything, like you always hear, it ties together. Like, the run game ties together with our play action pass and setting up plays, that go the other way from what the defense thinks. And so, but you have to be in control of the game for that to happen. And, once we get down or anything, then you open it up and you have to throw the ball and spread it out. But more than anything, going into a game, he just ties everything together. And we do a lot of things that look the same, but go the other way, whether it's a run, play action pass, roll out, you name it. He does things that set things up for games in advance. Like we go back and do a lot of self scout, and it's like, dude, we've been running this so much. Let's go the other way with it, or make it look the exact same, but do this. And so he's a wizard when it comes to that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. But the way that he explains coverages and defenses to us as quarterbacks, like he keeps it pretty simple. Like there's a lot of studying at first and learning his language and how he sees it. But once you understand it, it's like, dude, like I wish I would have known this, my whole life, growing up from high school to college, and learn his way of how he's thinking in certain situations with before half, trying to bleed out the clock or be smart and have the ball last, or in second and long, we're running this route to get, this amount of yards to get third and manageable. Like there's certain things that he's taught me where I'm like, dude, I wish I would have known this, down the road. But anyways, he's a wizard, and I'm excited to keep learning from him.
What's easier for you now, a couple years in?
I would say, just the language, like I said, of this offense. It's I always say it, but it's literally like learning another language. And the more you speak it, the more you're in it and experiencing it, the easier you see it in your mind before you walk up to the line and know what your answer is per coverage, per concept, all those things. I feel like just getting in and out of the huddle, the operation of playing quarterback I feel a lot more comfortable with it. But I think going into year 3, like the way Shanahan and I like talk to each other and stuff, like we're on the same, I feel like the same page, but I'm still learning from him, like I said. But that's what feels different, and that's what feels better going into year 3.
And I mean this like media and fans, we talk about you a lot because I think we're always like, this is like, he's really this good. And I think we're so visual, how it works. If you were 6'4", if you were a first round pick and you're winning all these games and making it to Super Bowl in your first season as like a full-time starter, then no one would ever like still have that. But I'm you know what I mean? Like the way you're talked about in the media, it's like, yeah, I know that he's good, but is he really this good? And if you'd had a different profile, if you looked a different way, I don't know that any of these debates would happen. I can't imagine a bigger waste of time than you or a pro athlete worrying about any of that stuff. But does it bother your brother who plays or your dad who coached you? Does it bother anybody close to you that it feels like there's still a reluctance to accept how good you've been as a quarterback?
Dude, I'm not going to lie. Like our family, like we're faith-based, and more than anything, we're just so grateful, like we're a grateful family with just what has happened with getting an opportunity in the NFL and the people that we've been able to meet. And we're just so grateful. So like, honestly, my family and I, we don't talk about any of that stuff. Like we know that it's there, some guys in the locker room will joke around about it with me or this or that. And it's like, to me, it's funny, but more than anything, what matters is winning ball games. And if you're winning ball games, it doesn't matter, and earning the trust and respect of the guys in this locker room, the people within this organization. Like that's where my time and energy goes to, not what the world has to say about me. And because there's always going to be something that's part of this game, and that's part of, what comes with this. But yeah, man, it's for me, I don't look at it like that. I'm just so grateful for the teammates that I have, the coaches that I have, the organization that I'm playing for. And I'm able to enjoy my life when I'm focusing on being grateful rather than trying to prove everybody wrong about everything. So
that's a perfect answer. And it's kind of the answer that I expect from you because, you hope to get to that stage in life where you go, man, thinking about any of this stuff is a massive waste of time. But when you're younger, especially when you're a public figure to your level too, like sometimes you can't help it, but it's a great answer. I thought it was really funny with Steve Young, where he was asking you about like your dad's role and everything and how he talks to you now that you're in the NFL, and that maybe when you were younger, he'd be going, oh, maybe a little bit more of this and a little less of this. And now that you're with Shanahan, he's smart enough as a football guy to know to just not even like he's not bringing up play calling tendencies to you, I imagine, right?
No, yeah, it's he'll tell me like the basics, like, hey, on that play was so and so open. I'm like, Dad, that's not even part of the read, like or whatever. But it's funny because he does leave it alone. He knows that I'm in good hands and that I've grown and I've learned, as a quarterback, just everything, the reads, going through all of it, handling all this. But he's a great dad, just knowing, that as a son, I like going home and talking to him about just life and, not all the things about the game, but every once in a while he will tell me like, hey man, like, how's your speed? Like, are you staying in shape? Are you doing this and that throughout the season? And he's still got that dad competitiveness in him. And I'll always be grateful for that. But he's a great dad. He loves on me more than anything. And I'm grateful that he's my pops. So.
Do you remember your signing bonus?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do.
I think I have the number right. Do you remember? Well, you said you remember it. Do you want me to share, or do you want to share it?
I won't share it, but
is it 80,000? Am I close?
Less, but I'll leave it at that.
77? Was it 77?
I think so. Maybe less, actually. But yeah.
I don't bring that up only because I can't wait for what the next one is. Do your teammates, do the skill guys know that?
Like, what do you mean? Like, just.
Well, because everybody's always in the locker room, like, talking about their money.
Yeah, I mean, everything's out there publicly, when it comes to how much you get paid, this and. But are we in there talking about how much we get paid, or we don't talk about that? We're just more about being humans and brothers and joking around and that stuff. So.
Well, it's not going to matter in a very short amount of time. So that would be the only way I would bring it up. When you're drafted, where you're drafted, and I was looking at the stuff, and I went, man, maybe you have to do it when you're introduced during training camp. I think they always make you guys do that.
Oh yeah,
too.
yeah. No, like rookies, before meetings and stuff, you get up and name school signing bonus like as a joke, and then you got to give a joke. And so everybody knows, going into it, but. Yeah, we're not sitting around at lunch or this or that talking about, contracts and stuff. So, yeah.
Well, just think the guy that introduced himself out of Iowa State, the last pick, we'd be like, that guy's going to lead us to a Super Bowl. Well, you're not going to have to worry about picking up boneless wings at Applebee's in a couple of years when you do the new deal. But I know that you're working with Saquon. Dan Campbell's involved in this stuff. Again, Applebee's, the official bar and grill of the NFL, and they've got a big promotion coming up. So why don't you share that with us?
Yeah, we got a social campaign coming out, with Applebee's. I think next Tuesday is when it's dropping, and it's just, we're going to show clips of, Saquon and I and Dan Campbell at the neighborhood Applebee's that we shot up in New Jersey, and basically just teamed up with Applebee's. They got 50-cent boneless wings coming out in the fall, and for me, like it's a special connection because growing up, after Little League games or youth football games, we were going to Applebee's with, my teammates and families and friends. And, when they called and wanted to do a partnership, I was like, man, let's go. I was pumped about it. So, and obviously they're the official grill and bar sponsor for the NFL. So it means a lot. It's legit. And got social channels. They're going to be showing everything on Instagram, Twitter, and so that's Applebee's, and you can go to applebees.com and follow up more about any food or special deals that they got going on as well. So,
have you worked in the food service industry prior to this?
I have not. No.
Okay.
So when we were shooting the commercial, they had me throwing, burgers and wings and handing off wings to Saquon, serving people in the restaurant. It was pretty neat.
Brock, I'm really excited that we get some time with you today, and even more excited to see the Niners play this season, man. So good luck.
Yes, sir. Right. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Great time to do this. We did it before the season last year. Sheil Kapadia is going to come on. We're going to talk about the top 5 players at each position, the one that we can rank. I went through last year's rankings, by the way, too. Sheil was better at this than I was as I looked over these. He was very early on a couple guys where he was like this, and then that player ended up having a top 5 year. So we'll do some of that in a second, but Sheil's also part of our Ringer.com NFL coverage. You can see his latest trade value column that is up now. It just was updated today, and of course, part of all of the NFL podcasts that we're doing on the main feed. So good to see you, man. What's up?
Yeah, good to be here. 2 days away from the opener?
I know. I got excited this morning prepping all of it and running through it all. So before we do kind of our top 5 stuff, I do want to spend some time on the trade value deal here. Pretty self-explanatory, but you know what? Let's not do it for you. You're the guy that wrote it today. So run us through kind of your parameters for how you do this.
Yeah, it's Bill Simmons' classic idea with the NBA, bringing it to the NFL. And so the idea is rank the 75 players with the highest trade value right now. So if you have 2 players, you decide, well, which team would trade that player for the other guy. Or sometimes I just look at it, hey, if these two guys were available on the open market, who would bring back more in a trade? So you look at positional value, how good the player is, contract age is a huge thing in the NFL. When you just look at some of these guys who are great players, if they hit 30, the trade value is not there. So yeah, always an exercise where I do it. And then midway through the season, I'm like, oh my God, take that off the internet. That I completely screwed that up, but it's fun to do before the season.
Well, I don't think you'll worry about where you had number one. Mahomes, 28 going into this season, his own tier. I don't even know how anyone could have a problem with that.
Yeah, that was easy. We gave him his own tier this year. It was just like no one, there's literally no trade package you could put together where they even have a 2-minute meeting. Where I was thinking in the history of the NFL or since I've been alive, that's probably not the case for almost, even when like Brady and Manning, if those guys were available for each other, maybe you have a conversation theoretically. But yeah, Mahomes is in his own tier, no doubt.
Okay, so the next group here, how hard was it to figure out a cutoff line after Allen, Stroud, Burrow, and Lamar?
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough to know how high do I put Stroud after one season. I know you're big on that, and I'm sure we'll get to this in the top fives. Hey, don't crown him after one season. So your voice was kind of in the back of my head there a little bit, but I'm just all in on Stroud. I just think if on a rookie contract, if you offer him for some of these other quarterbacks who have been really good but are getting paid over $50 million per year, I think those teams at least would have a little meeting and say, should we do this? Is it easier to build our team? And then you mentioned it, that next group of quarterbacks, I have Jordan Love, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, and Jalen Hurts. And these are tough guys to slot because they don't have the accomplishments as the guys above them yet. I think that most of them are good quarterbacks that a lot of teams in the NFL would love to have, even with the big contracts.
Yeah, Hurts is an interesting one because going into last year, when something really stands out, I'll think of it a year later. And going into last year, and I touched on this with Sando a little bit when he was doing his quarterback tiers, is that Hurts last season was, okay, he's the best in the NFC. And there really wasn't a lot of pushback. And maybe it felt a little bit early. They're just coming off of the Super Bowl, though. You knew you loved the offensive line, the weapons, and all that kind of stuff. I do think he had 2 significant injuries just based on the way he was running around there towards the end last season. So I think it's worth at least bringing it up. But it probably feels like Hurts being challenged as the top NFC guy and being in this next group probably makes a little bit more sense than just Hurts is going to be a top 5 quarterback for the next decade. Maybe he will be, but it felt like it was more of an agreed upon assumption going into 23 than this year.
Yeah, and the hardest thing with the quarterbacks is looking at the supporting cast. And if you take them out of that environment, if you take Jalen Hurts away from A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and this offensive line, what does it look like? On the other hand, the coaching was terrible last season. So maybe, if he got with one of these great play callers, maybe it looks different. So that was definitely a tough one with him. Jordan Love, I have 6th on the list where I'm sure people will say, give me a break. He's been good for half a season, but he's another guy. I'm just like, quarterbacks, if I see it, I'm just like, I'm going to go all in. I'll be wrong a year later, but I believe what I saw from Jordan Love.
Trevor Lawrence is an interesting one. It feels like his stock has never been lower. Last year was not great, but whenever I run myself through an exercise, you go, okay, what do you think is more likely? Like that's just a down year, and he ends up being probably one of these franchise guys, not necessarily in the top 5, but flirting with the top 10 most of the next 10 years of his career. Like that still seems far more likely to me than a number where we'll say, wow, he got paid just like the rest of those guys, and he's just not even close, even though last year it was not heading in the right direction. But I guess I'm defaulting towards optimism with him more. And sometimes I wonder why I am, but I am.
Yeah, part of it probably has to do with what we all thought of him as a draft prospect, but I'm with you. Last year is so explainable to me. The guy had 4 different injuries. He lost more, EPA on drops than any other quarterback in the NFL, which is just one metric we can look at. But basically, he was killed by drops last year. They got horrible turnover luck. It's like all this stuff that you say, this usually doesn't translate from one season to the next. So I've got the Jaguars in the playoffs. If I had to pick like a sleeper MVP, I think he's like plus 3,000. I mean, some of the names ahead of him, I couldn't believe it. I kind of think he's going to have a bounce back year, even though you're right. I do think we should adjust what we thought of him when he came into the league to what he is now. We have several years of evidence, but I still think he's going to be really good.
Okay. The non-quarterbacks, how many?
Yeah, this next group is kind of the non-quarterback studs where you have Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, Justin Jefferson, and Nick Bosa was my next group. And just edge rushers on the, when they're in their prime and they're available. We saw it with Khalil Mack several years ago. Those guys tend to bring back a huge haul in a trade. Justin Jefferson, we'll probably have a discussion when we get to the wide receivers. Is he in his own tier? I still think Hall of Fame, future Hall of Famer, 25 years old, can take over a game. I still have him in there and kind of that next tier for the non-quarterbacks.
Okay. The edge guys, all this makes sense. There's not really any pushback. I think TJ Watt not being in this conversation, though, that has to do with age, where, Garrett's 28, Watt's 30, Parsons 25, Jefferson 25, and Bosa's still only 26. So it's not the player. That has to be an age thing for TJ to not be in this group of the other edge guys, correct?
No doubt. Yeah, he's entering his age 30 season, which is not late. I still think he'd get a massive haul if he were available via trade, but just bumped him down a little bit from those guys who are all still in their 20s.
Who was the biggest riser from where you did this, halfway through the season last year?
Yes, the biggest, you know what? I'm looking at it now. I think it's probably Kyle Hamilton, who I have 18th actually, it was probably Jordan Love, but non-quarterbacks, I think it's Kyle Hamilton, who I think has emerged as one of the best defensive players in football, and he's on a rookie contract, and you can use him. I think the positionless football thing is generally overstated. Most guys can't do that. He's one of the guys who can do that, and he was so disruptive last year that I just thought, man, on that contract, he's one of the most valuable trade assets in the NFL.
You have Will Anderson 23rd overall. Is that because of the age and contract? I mean, it's not like Will Anderson isn't really good, but I guess when I saw that, I went, wow, there's only 22 guys. That's a no.
Yeah, the rookie contract for him, an edge guy who I think his game kind of resembles TJ Watt. Like if the Texans called up the Steelers and said Will Anderson for TJ Watt, I think the Steelers are doing that. They're saying we're getting a guy who's 7 years younger on a rookie contract versus TJ Watt. So yeah, the rookie contract guys who were rookies last year played really well. They're always going to be really high on this list, especially if they play a premium position.
Who was the biggest drop?
Some guys dropped completely out. So I'm trying to think who those guys potentially would be. There might be just guys because of injuries or whatever the case may be. Who was I know you didn't ask me this, but I'm doing the old trick where you answer the question. What do you think Brock Purdy gets? So today, if the 49ers say Brock Purdy is available, there's some, it's not an injury, it's nothing. Do you think teams in the NFL would look at it and say, we can take him, put him in our ecosystem, and he's going to be really good? Or do you think they would say, no way, he's got Shanahan, he's got those weapons, we're not giving up anything for him? Because I kind of had him in the middle of this list. I had no idea what to do with him. You could make the argument, Sheil, he should be up there with Hurts. So some could make that argument based on the numbers, or you could say he shouldn't be on this list at all. Like no one's going to believe they can do with Purdy what Shanahan did with Purdy. So I have him 61 in this same tier with Kyler Murray and Anthony Richardson. Basically quarterbacks, I have no idea what to do with.
Yeah, I liked how you put those three together. It's actually probably my favorite part of the entire piece, because my first instinct was, well, how could you have Kyler 2 spots close to Purdy? I mean, technically you have Purdy at 61 and Murray at 63. So you're saying Purdy's worth more, but I'm like, shouldn't that gap be more considering Murray's contract, considering his injury history? But it really is this unknown group. I mean, Richardson's unknown because he played 4 games. So, we'll see. And then you think, okay, well, if Purdy's gotten to a Super Bowl, like how could you even compare him? On top of the fact that contractually, unless the Niners could do it a year early if they wanted to, I don't know if they will. But he's under contract for 2 more years. We know his average annual salary isn't even 7 figures. So, I mean, I would agree. I would have him higher than the other 2, and you do. But because they're all together, my first thought was that doesn't make any sense. But I actually don't really have an answer for you. I mean, I would rather have Purdy than the other 2 guys. As simple as that. Maybe I think there should be a gap in there, but you don't have the gap, really.
Yeah, no, it's he was probably the hardest guy on the entire list. Anthony Richardson, same thing. Guys barely played, but where he got drafted, he still has 3 years left on that rookie contract. I think teams would say, yeah, we'll give up a first for the possibility of what Anthony Richardson could be. So those guys were tough, and I didn't put any rookies on the list until they play a game.
Right. Is McDuffie, did you feel like you ended up having him a little low at 69 in corner for Kansas City?
Yeah. I had him in that tier where guys on their rookie contract. Yeah, I think there's definitely a case for putting him higher given what he's shown so far.
Yeah, and this exercise, like you're the guy that puts together the 100 names or so here, and then it's like, hey, you had this guy 72. I really think he should have been 67. You're like, okay, cool. Like, so you totally disagree with what I did. So what are you actually saying here? Trying to think, anyone that wasn't on this that you wanted to put down, but you just felt like, okay, and again, you have the no rookie rule, which will be updated halfway through the season. So we can't be looking for rookies here, even if we think that there's a rookie that was taken that we liked in the preseason. We just all are going to like Caleb Williams. Like if he's on this and you were trying to trade for him right now, he might be 10th.
Yeah. He'll I think be in the top 20 or whatever midway through the season when I do the update. One guy who I think could make a monster leap, almost a Kyle Hamilton like leap, Derek Stingley on the Texans. I think when he played, he was so good last year. And I think if he stays healthy, which he has not been able to do so far, so I left him just off. He was probably the hardest omission. But I think if he stays healthy, he's a guy who could go from not being on to all of a sudden rookie contract, one of the best corners in the NFL, shutdown cover guy, really high on this list. So yeah, he's a guy that was hard to leave off.
Let's run through the top 5 then. All right. So we did this last year. Sheil and I are our top 5 players, these positions, unless it was just the O-line grouping, which we weren't going to start sitting there naming guards and tackles, which may seem unfair. And I couldn't tell you that you're wrong about that. But looking through the quarterbacks here, why don't you start first, and I'll just cover up. We'll see if we have any disagreements.
Yeah, I've got Mahomes 1, Allen 2, Burrow 3, Lamar 4, and I have CJ Stroud 5. So just real quick, Burrow and Lamar, if you want to flip flop them, that was basically a coin flip for me. And then the 5th spot was tough. I looked at Stroud, I looked at Herbert, I looked at Jordan Love. Ultimately, I was just like, who do I think is going to be the best out of those guys this year? And I ended up going with Stroud.
I love the Stroud conversation that Sando presented to us when we were doing the QB tiers, because to put him up that high, you feel like, okay, you're breaking the rule of like, let me just see a second year before I have you ahead of everybody else other than the 4 guys. By the way, we have the exact same 4 in order. I really don't know going into this year. I don't think anyone is necessarily like, I think you could just go Mahomes and then Allen, and now the conversation starts. I really feel that way. And, we'll see with Allen if the momentum carries over from last year, because the playoff numbers, despite the disappointment, like my argument with Allen is, okay, he's losing to the guy that may end up being the best ever of all time. And he's putting up big numbers in these games for the most part. So you look at his overall playoff resume and what his numbers are, what Lamar Jackson's are, like that's the tiebreaker, depending, even if you like Lamar better and you argue the 2 MVPs. So Burrow feels like if he's hurt this year, he's not going to be on this list going into it next year. Right. And back to the Sando point on CJ, he brought up a good point that makes it sound like you're maybe arguing against CJ being 5th or being a tier 1 quarterback, which he wasn't in his exercise. But maybe they do have better weapons than we thought. Maybe D'Amico is that good of a coach. Maybe the play calling and all these different things, like maybe this was a much better situation for a rookie quarterback than we're ever used to seeing, because in the beginning, this team's going to be in the playoffs. Like a rookie, he's going to continue to put up these numbers. So I don't have any problem with that. I guess I still feel like Herbert has become the modern day Matthew Stafford, where I watch a really good quarterback on Sundays, and I think everything else around him has been generally disastrous the last 3 years. So he now has become the target for people that like to maybe just go, oh, well, if he's that good, how come all of these different things? I'm like, actually, I do think he's that good. And a lot of the stuff proves out that he is. And the defense and special teams is the thing that's pulling down the team collectively. And sometimes that just happens. So I didn't love it. If CJ had 2 years like this, maybe CJ's my 5th quarterback, but I guess I'm still holding out at least one more year with Herbert.
Yeah, my defense for Stroud, the point you made there's he had the most injured offensive line in the NFL. No team, I think, if you look at some of the advanced stat stuff, like had a more injured offensive line in like the last 20 years. And so to do that with their run game was terrible. I think they had a bottom 5 run game in the NFL when you look at efficiency. So I thought in those circumstances to do what he did, I saw it. I'm with you on Herbert. It's just like, to me, it's just kind of like it's a fatigue having that conversation still. And this year he's got nothing around him. So it's like, we're not going to reach a resolution. So I'm like, check back with me after, 2025 and I'll feel good. But I still believe in Herbert, no doubt about it.
All right. Running back. This is the worst thing I did, I think, in all of these last year. I guess I was just going with expecting McCaffrey to be hurt. So therefore I went Chubb. It wasn't like egregious because I put McCaffrey second. It feels egregious now. I will not make that same mistake, but you go first.
Yeah, I've got McCaffrey 1, Breece Hall 2, Bijan Robinson 3, Saquon 4, and Jahmyr Gibbs 5. Running back is a young man's game. It's hard for me if you're entering, 29, 30. It's just like those guys come with so much risk. So yeah, I've got 3 guys here who are on their rookie deals, and then McCaffrey and Saquon as the veterans who still have some good years left.
Okay. Bijan was one of our points of contention last year because you just had him on it.
Yeah.
Before he had ever played. I was like, can you do that? And you did it. Do whatever you want. Here he probably had what we'd consider a disappointing rookie year based on his talent and expectations. Everybody's blamed the coaches that are not there now. So I have McCaffrey, and I have I have Gibbs second.
I like it. I love Gibbs.
I have Bijan third. Now, I still think Bijan should have gone ahead of Gibbs in the draft. I'm not going to regurgitate all my running back draft arguments that we've done for years and years. And so I went, McCaffrey, Gibbs, Bijan, then Hall. And, I thought about Henry.
Yeah.
But because I had, maybe it's my stubbornness of the last year, because Chubb only played 2 games. I think he's good enough that you can't just take him out of the top. Like, fine, you want to take him out of the top 5 because he's hurt, but like maybe we should give him the benefit of the doubt, still be a top 5 running back and healthy after missing basically an entire season. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, no, I love Chubb. It's just the injury. I don't know, running backs who have an injury that serious where he's not going to be out there to start the season, that makes me a little nervous, where I was like, I don't know if I can have him on here this year. And then the other guy, Breece Hall, when I was preparing for this, everything you look at suggests that give this guy some level of competence with the offensive line and the quarterback, and he can be an absolute monster. Like, he led every running back in plays of 20 plus yards last year when you look at receptions and carries, more than Christian McCaffrey, where I'm like, that can't be true, but it's true. He was top 5 in yards after contact. He was top 5 if you look at like when they hit 20 miles per hour. So he's just a complete back, where I wonder if we're doing this exercise before next season. I wouldn't be surprised if we had him number 1.
Okay. I know on the fantasy side of things, I mean, he's basically the number 2 overall pick here, but that's not exactly what we're doing. All right, receivers. Jefferson, and then who?
Tyreek Hill 2, CeeDee Lamb 3, AJ Brown 4, and Jamar Chase 5. This one was hard. You leave off Amon-Ra St. Brown. You leave off, I did, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, who I think is going to have a monster year. You can Puka Nacua. I mean, what he did as a rookie. So there are a lot of guys you can choose from, but those were my 5.
Okay. I'm going to go Jefferson as well, then Hill, then CeeDee, then Chase, AJ Brown.
Okay. Same 5.
Devontae Adams not on this group anymore, huh?
I know. It just, God, get him a quarter, but that really backfired, that trade, for everyone involved, including us having to watch him with that Raiders team. Maybe he'll get traded before the trade deadline in season to a team with a quarterback, and we can put him back on there. He absolutely could be on there. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, tight ends.
I still have Travis Kelce first. I watched what everyone else did with Kelce, and then I was looking at it, and I'm like, he was second in receiving yards among tight ends last year. He was first in first downs among tight ends. He's the number one target on his team. If it's third down in the playoffs and you need a bucket, I'm still going to him. So until he falls off the map, I'm going with Travis Kelce, number one. George Kittle, number two. Sam Laporta, number three, who he could be one at this time next year. Mark Andrews, four. And then I appease the hipsters a little bit with five. Let's go with Trey McBride, number five. Just, in there, Arizona, no one watching last year unless you're doing fantasy. He was awesome last year. It came down to McBride or Dalton Kincaid for me. And every number I looked at, I'm like, McBride was better than him last year. So I like both those guys, but I threw the Cardinals, threw McBride a bone there.
Okay. So Hawkinson at this point off of yours because of the injury?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I overweight the injuries. Yeah, but yeah, that was really the only reason why he could be on there if he's healthy.
Yeah, it looks like this week it was updated to a week 5 return. So we have the same top 4. We even have, I didn't expect that we were both going to have Andrews. Andrews, statistically missing some games is not going to hold up to the previous season. You could say it's actually been like 2 years since he's had that great statistical season. I go with Andrews just based on watching it and thinking he seems like he's still awesome at tight end and a huge part of what they're doing. And we'll be curious to see what it looks like in the red zone now with Lamar as an option, Henry as an option, Zay Flowers clearly being, I think he might end up being the most talented receiver, the most productive receiver that Lamar is going to have. And I know the playoff game was incredibly disappointing for a couple different things with Zay in that game. But we have the same top 4. Yeah. And I love that we both have Andrews. And I just kept Hawkinson there because he's coming back at some point. I just think he has to be in the top 5 conversation.
Yeah, no doubt. He's, in terms of well-rounded tight ends, he's right there. And then with Andrews, like you mentioned, he has to be the guy. He's had to be the guy for their offense. It's not like they've, Kittle's numbers were better than him last year. You could make the case for Kittle, no doubt. But how do you differentiate between a guy who's got Debo, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk on his team, and then Andrews, who for many years, he's just, like you said, been their number one receiving option. So I gave him a little bump there and thought he still deserved to be in there.
O-line, getting in there, doing the dirty work.
Right.
Flip
this for social, right?
Right. Yeah. This one's a little tougher. And as soon as you announce whatever it is, you can understand the arguments outside of it. But I looked at some of the grading stuff, and I just look around. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, the way their guards closed off the interior, that you're absolutely nuts. So this is a bit of an assumption on my part. So I'll just admit to it here. What did you go with? Because we both had Philly last year as number 1.
Yeah, I'll give Brandon Thorne a shout out. He's like the O-line guru who I don't have an opinion on the O-line until I read his stuff because he's awesome at it. I've got the Lions number 1, the Chiefs number 2, the Eagles number 3, the Colts 4, and the Cowboys 5. And I honestly didn't feel that great about any of these. I mean, the Chiefs are starting a rookie left tackle. The Eagles are going to a season without Kelce, and they've got Mekhi Becton starting at right guard. The Colts at this time last year, we thought their offensive line sucked, and then they had a great season. So I'm like, oh, maybe they are good. And then the Cowboys are probably starting 2 rookies on their offensive line. So this was, I flirted with the Jets a little bit. I thought about the Browns, but they've got injuries. So this was a tough one.
Yeah, everybody seems to agree that Detroit is the best. I don't know that I read anything anywhere. And this is the combination of name recognition and looking at grades and seeing the people that you trust that do a better job. Certainly you do a better job than I do and the other people that you're even talking about here. But it felt like Detroit was a consensus number 1. I kept Philly there, even though Juergens is in at center. He's only played 45 snaps in the position. The Colts probably have the best tackle pair in the NFL. Cleveland's an interesting one because I think on talent alone, you can make an argument for 2. But when you started talking about Houston's offensive line injuries, when you look at just the top end talent that wasn't playing for the Browns and they still found a way to miraculously kind of like, just even be on the radar at the end of the year, I put them down at 4. And I, like you, I thought about Atlanta with the grades of some of their individual players being terrific. I think Lindstrom had the best run blocking grade of any interior lineman. Kansas City, I went with them 5, even though we all watched the nightmare of Taylor at tackle.
Yeah.
So maybe the rest of it I think is so good. And there's also an unfair advantage that they're not going to be as exposed because Mahomes is just going to figure out how to adjust. It's like the Brady stuff. If there was a certain year where the offensive line didn't feel like it was as strong in other years, then he would just adapt his game for whatever deficiencies they had. So putting the Chiefs fifth feels like cheating a little bit, but it's less of an assumption than putting the Jets at 5.
Yeah, the Chiefs' interior is awesome. You mentioned it, Jawan Taylor, I think, had 19 penalties last year at right tackle, which is a insane amount. And then a rookie left tackle. So everything with the Chiefs is so hard, other than Mahomes is awesome. You know, it's like you take some of these players and you put them in a different environment with a different quarterback. Well, how good are they actually? But yeah, I think their interior is really good. But for the second straight year, they've got a questioned offensive tackle.
Okay, edge guys. This group is, I think I hated doing it last year. And whenever I did it, I was like, it's just going to be wrong. And now I did it again this year and I feel like it's wrong, but it just speaks to, I mean, we're having the exact same conversation 12 months later when it comes to this position.
Yeah, it's stacked. You could have probably 12 guys have a case for being in the top 5. I went with Micah Parsons first, Myles Garrett second, Nick Bosa third, TJ Watt fourth, and Max Crosby fifth. And one thing about Crosby and why I've got him in there, he never comes off the field. He played 384 more snaps than any other defensive lineman over the last 3 seasons. That's the equivalent of 6 more games. And so, like, you have Max Crosby, your depth, you don't have to worry about it as much because he never comes off the field. Other guys come in on third down, they're fresh. He's already out there on first and second down. So I just feel like he deserves to be recognized for that. It's like an old school mentality where he's just like, yeah, I can handle playing 90% of the snaps. I don't need a breather. I'm good. So he definitely deserves, in my opinion, to be in the top 5.
Same 5, different order: Garrett, Watt, Parsons, Crosby, Bosa. But it almost sounds like you're making an argument for Crosby to be even higher.
It's funny because then you look at like the rate stuff and it's like, well, the other guys are getting, hitting the quarterback at a higher rate. So you gotta mix the two. Like, all right, you're getting more snaps out of him. The other guys are more efficient. Are they more efficient because they're fresher? I still feel good about those top 4. I mean, those are all guys, and Crosby can do it too. But man, those guys are all like in the defensive player of the year conversation year after year after year. They've all been just so productive.
Okay, so same 5, different order. Interior defensive lineman, the first time without AD in the middle there, Aaron Donald retiring. I've got Chris Jones, Dexter Lawrence, Quinnen Williams. Then I think I just had a bunch of different names. Like, I still like Jeffrey Simmons a lot, but I know that he didn't grade out as well. But I kind of feel like as far as like game wrecking from the inside and his versatility and like what he could do, it's still worth keeping him on this list. For Derek Brown was another one. So I'm kind of curious. I don't know that I've even finalized this one because it's just harder because you can't just go by stats with these guys.
Yeah, we've got the same top 3: Chris Jones, Quinnen Williams, and Dexter Lawrence. I gave Justin Matabuke from the Ravens some love. He was just 11 and a half sacks at defensive tackle last year when he was lined up as a defensive tackle. That was the most in the NFL. So I think he was kind of like an under the radar good player. And then he broke out last year for the Ravens and then got a big contract. And then 5, the guy who's going to line up next to Max Crosby, which is going to be a lot of fun. And that's Christian Wilkins. Always been good against the run. Pass rush really took a step in the right direction last season. And like Crosby, never comes off the field. Those 2 guys, they played 90% of the snaps. Again, very rare for a defensive tackle to be as reliable and have that kind of conditioning, that kind of stamina. So I gave Christian Wilkins the 5th spot. But yeah, man, the other guys, Simmons, Brown, you mentioned it, DeForest Buckner, Kenny Clark, Jonathan Allen, Christian Barmore, if he's healthy, Ed Oliver, I thought had a really good season. And then the guy who I think at this time next year, I think Jalen Carter is going to be on this list. I feel confident about nothing with the Eagles this year, about what they're going to be, except for the fact that Jalen Carter is going to be an absolute beast. So I think he's a guy to keep an eye on, make this list next season.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, because if you look at his grades over the first and second half of the season, he was on a tear to start. And maybe it was just people getting used to him and then him having to figure it out. But I don't think you're wrong. Like, he's already a top 10 guy. Brown is an interesting one because we're looking at somebody who's just probably the best run defender in the game.
Yeah.
But, Carolina was such a mess. It's probably a lot of people listening, probably, not even thinking about him. I think Cam Hayward's still probably in the conversation. The Steelers, despite the fact that he's been around a long time at 35 years old, but he's still really, really good. So I like Matabuke. I'm going to probably put him down 5th then after Simmons. All right.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay. Corners,
I feel good. The 1-2, you could just flip flop them every year, or one of us pick one and the other. I think Sauce Gardner, I have one, and Patrick Surtain too. I think they're both awesome. Either one of them could have the belt for best corner in the NFL. 3 is a personal favorite. That's Jalen Johnson from the Bears. I thought he was awesome last year. Man coverage. When he played man coverage last year, opponents completed 3 of 8 passes for 32 yards on 101 snaps of man coverage for Jalen Johnson last year. And he's awesome in zone too. He's physical, he tackles, he does it all. 4, I have a guy I know you love, Trent McDuffie. We talked about him earlier. I've got him on this list. And 5 was tough. I'm going to try to call my shot a little bit with this one and go with Devon Witherspoon and predict that by the end of the year, we're going to be saying he's one of the best corners in the NFL. Now, he'll play nickel. He'll be lined up all over the place. But I just think what I saw last year with Mike McDonald, with that Seahawks scheme, I think he's going to have a big year.
Okay. We have the same, because I think Surtain is somebody that he graded out so spectacularly 2 years ago that maybe he's being judged against that. But then there was some other coverage stuff where he was still off the charts, but maybe the overall metrics weren't as good. I mean, it depends on really what you want to look at here. Yeah. But watching, just thinking back to the games of like, hey, that guy is just killing it out there. Sauce is 1, Surtain is 2 for me. I love Jalen Johnson. I think he's like one of the most underrated players in the entire league.
Agreed.
And I've got McDuffie 4, and I gave the 5th spot to Jalen Ramsey.
Okay. Legacy award, lifetime achievement.
Do you not like my legacy place?
No, he's still good. Yeah, he's still good. I'm good with that. You have to knock him off, clearly until he's out of there because he's had such an awesome career.
Okay. Safeties.
I've got Kyle Hamilton takes over the number 1 spot this year for me. Minkah Fitzpatrick coming off maybe a little bit of a down year, but it's still awesome. I've got him number 2. Antoine Winfield Jr., what the Bucs did with him last year, maybe the best playmaker in the NFL at safety. He was awesome last year. Jesse Bates has shown he can do it in different schemes. He signs with the Falcons last season, has a great year after so many good seasons with the Bengals. And then 5, Javon Holland of the Miami Dolphins. Those are my 5. I'm curious. There's a guy on here that sort of fits the Derwin James. I meant to say fits the Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah.
The Jalen Ramsey mold. Yeah.
Good instincts, because I thought about it. I thought about it, and I don't know. It feels like you can make an argument to be like, are we judging him against his peak? If the safety class weren't as deep as it were, I'd probably put him 5th. I probably still would. But it is really deep. I mean, you can make an argument for Winfield over Hamilton, but I too, like you, love the versatility of Hamilton. I love those moments where I'm like, I cannot believe this guy can do all of these things at this body type. So maybe I'm falling too much in love with that, but I still have Hamilton 1. I put Winfield 2. PFF actually ranks Winfield 1. Jesse Bates has to be on everybody's top 5, a free agent signing that actually worked out. I have Minkah 4, and then I too, even though Holland was down on snaps last year, look, would I fight to the death about some of this? No, not on this one. But I just think Holland's a baller when he's out there. So pretty simple. Baller alert.
Yeah, no doubt. Holland's awesome. McKinney, I like. Packers signed him. Marcus Williams of the Ravens is really good. And Derwin James, I do think new scheme, new coaching, he could be a guy we're talking about middle of this season. Wow, he looks way better than he did last season. So yeah, I'm not giving up on him.
Okay, last one, and it's my favorite. Former guest here on the show, who did one of the most impressive jobs ever as a guest because of the disconnect with our technology at the time. Fred Warner starts the list, and then the list really starts after Fred. And I don't know who could have anyone other than Fred number 1 here.
Yeah. I mean, I put Warner just for what you mentioned, battling through that adversity as a podcaster. I mean, we can relate with that. So he's got to be.
Do you want to tell me
there.
like he's gonna when there's chaos around him and it's the fourth quarter and they don't know what's going on, they can't figure out anything, he's gonna stay cool and calm? I thought that before we had him on. Now I know it.
Yeah, Wi-Fi's down. He just mentally
he was guessing my questions as the audio and video got cut off, and then answering questions that he assumed I was asking. I mean, we don't talk. He's playing like a couple moves ahead of everybody.
No doubt. He's had the rep, so he deserves to be number one. Big gap between him and everyone else, as it is every year. I think Roquan Smith is pretty entrenched there as two for me, where I didn't have to think about anyone else. And then if you are a fan of a team and you think, man, our linebackers stink, you're not alone. I mean, you look, it was hard to get to 5. I don't know how you felt about it. I was like, yeah, Warner, Roquan Smith, awesome. Okay, now where am I going with this? So I gave Demario Davis, who despite being 34, 35 years old, still getting it done. It's kind of like you had earlier with Jalen Ram. I'm like, until someone knocks him off, and I don't see other great young linebackers, I have him 3. CJ Mosley, very strange career, was awesome with the Ravens, signed a big deal with the Jets, sat out the COVID season. He was awesome last year. I thought CJ Mosley with the Jets. I have him there at 4. And then 5, it came down to a bunch of guys for me. Let's give the Jets some love. I'm going to give Quincy Williams the 5th spot here. He wants to punish you when he hits you, which I love. And last year, the question always with him was coverage. He led all linebackers in PBUs, pass breakups, last season. So a couple other guys you could definitely have in there at 4 or 5, but that Jets linebacker tandem is really, really good. So I gave them both spots.
Wow, 2 Jets on there. I'll admit, when I watch them, when they're rolling defensively with those 2 guys, I'd say over the last couple of years, they stand out. They totally stand out. Top 3, we have the same. Demario's still on mine. Milano would have been on it if he weren't injured now going into the year. So that's a huge problem. Milano to me is a top 5 guy, but I can't put him on it now with the injury. So I'll go CJ, and then I'll close it out with somebody coming back healthy after playing through injury last year, Nick Bolton, the Chiefs.
Yeah. Him and Levante David were the 2 of the other ones where I thought, all right, these guys have a good case to still be on there for sure.
Okay, when's the first pod coming out?
Later today. We got a Ringer NFL show we're recording later today. We got the Ringers Philly special going strong, and you mentioned it. We got the trade value rankings on the ringer.com, and then a Tuesday column I'm writing every week this season. So you can check that out starting next week. Thanks as always, Sheil. Talk to you soon. All right, thanks for having me.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
The email address is always lifeadvicerr@gmail.com. We've got Kyle, we've got Steve, fresh off a holiday weekend, and we have some news. We have some news for a live show in Philly. Ceruti, I know you know the logistics better than I do, so why don't you tell everybody what it is?
Yeah, we have some tickets still left on sale. We're going to Philly at the Fillmore. It's Tuesday, October 1st. Doors open at 7, shows at 8. And just, it's kind of a reunion of shows of sorts because our guy Chris Long is stopping by.
That's right. Did you see his first pitch in St. Louis?
I did. What'd you think?
A little high.
Yeah. It's better than being low, though, right? I mean, you'd rather, rather rip it. And yeah. I don't want to bounce it. I'd much rather throw it way over the catcher's head than bounce it.
Yeah, at least you got the juice at that point,
What if it's 0-2, though, and you're just getting it in the dirt?
It was.
When I'm going over the top. That was the Greeny thing. Greeny used to always be like, the worst thing you can do is bounce it. It's like, well, dude, you're throwing a pop-up from like 10 feet in front of the
Okay, yeah, don't throw the Ephus pitch. But, at least if you're going to throw it high.
Yeah, you're right. He's an athlete, though. He's an athlete. He looked great in that uniform, too. Was that the STL? That thing looked just dope. St. Louis has the best stuff. They really do.
You do love their fitted caps, as evidenced by several videos where you've been made fun of in.
Yeah. No, I'm willing to offer my up to be made fun of. There's nothing more. You want to know disappointment? Be in Europe with a St. Louis hat on and have somebody be like, no way. St. Louis. Nope. What? Where are you from? Massachusetts. What?
Oh,
Yeah. Whatever. Like the hat. I might. I've been on this terrible run with the hats, and I might just be over it. I just like the way they fit. They fit better.
yeah.
I don't want to be another guy with a Red Sox hat on walking around. You go home to visit and you throw on your Red Sox hat. It's like, oh, I lost you. Where are you? Oh, there he is. He's over there. And the Mookie Betts trade.
It's been a tough run. Yeah, for baseball and your boy.
About that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So is there anything else that we need? Kyle, you're making it, right?
I'm making it. I might be deep at that show. I mean, there might be worlds colliding at that show. I don't think the New York City guys, but we got some Hollywood guys and some Poughkeepsie guys. My sister-in-law lives like 10 minutes from the theater. Yeah, we'll see. My wife's coming with me. We'll see how that goes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but I might be deep at this show.
I might not even make it now.
So
You might be busy that day.
Yeah.
Kyle's going to show. Kyle has a live show. No, the fact that Chris is going to be there makes it like 100 times better. Right. So we're thrilled.
And Wargon's going to be there. Wargon's making the trip down. People very confused about who Wargon is, what he does, how to
Put
spell
a face
his
to the name. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're just interested in Wargon, he's going to be around as well.
Right. Wargon, were you able to time this out to maybe get a Penn State game in? I don't know how their schedule plays. No, you guys think I'm laughing. I talked at Penn State big in the open. Logistically, Wargon, does anything work out for you to make it back to Happy Valley?
No, I haven't been back since I graduated.
Cool.
It's been like a decade,
Okay.
I'd say.
Didn't go to the old 10-year?
No, I didn't get to the 10-year reunion.
Not a big homecoming guy. Yeah.
No.
It is kind of like a pain to get to. But yeah.
Yeah, it's out there.
Not if
too
you love
late,
it.
dude. Fair. Yeah, Ryan didn't even go to LSU, and he goes there every year.
Yeah, right. I mean, the amount of times I had to tell people to be like, okay, so what happened again? Somebody in the suite I was in at the LSU Vegas, the LSU USC game was like, wait, you didn't go to LSU? Like, nope. And by the way, just like the hats, you want to call me a fucking loser? Go ahead. I'm not even sure you're wrong.
Wait, can I get some clarity though?
I'm not getting defensive. I'm kind of agreeing with you. Those that have been critical.
I sound mad, but I agree with you.
Yeah, right.
I'm not mad. I'm not mad.
I'm mad at myself.
Wait, were these like Americans in Europe that were stopping you, or they were Europeans that thought you were from St. Louis? Because that seems intense too. I don't know.
Dudes from St. Louis.
No. Extremely
Abroad.
disappointed people from St. Louis.
Okay, all right, man. I didn't know there'd be a lot of St. Louis people, and
Well, because
San
we've been
Sebastian.
through this. The Blue Jays hat I could justify. The St. Louis one I could justify. And then when I threw the Pittsburgh one in the mix, because I actually already really liked that hat, and I felt like there was way less, like Toronto people were really bummed out because they thought it was even cooler. I mean, all we need to do is think of Adnan. Like, he can't make it through a highlight without mentioning Joey Votto's from Canada.
Yeah.
Although, you know what? We got to take it easy on Adnan. I think when I said pass on the poutine invite, he really didn't like that.
Immediate text. Text.
Yeah. And I was the line was there. It had to be done just for content, but it's not a pass to hang out with Adnan. Everybody knows I love the guy. So it wasn't that. It was all of it. He was on 11 that whole weekend when we saw him. But I'm telling you right now, if like there's ever an international event, like globally, if Adnan Virk is not one of the ambassadors, just get that guy at the Chamber of Commerce or something out front, just pointing people in the right direction. No one's more passionate about it. So when you walk around with a Toronto hat globally, Indochina, the Maldives, and somebody from Toronto sees you in that hat, and then you're like, no, I live in LA. You're like, oh. So, I mean, when I was walking around Vancouver in the Pirates hat, somebody was like, Yinzer. And luckily I knew what it meant. And I just kind of pointed right back.
All right, there you
I
go.
just went, you got it, buddy, and kept walking. I did one of the walk and point, little six gun, whatever.
I kind of
And
have that
like,
with Harley Davidson. That's the closest. I don't really rep other places, but I do have that with Harley Davidson, and I don't really know what to do about it. I never take it as far as been like, yeah, I got a bike at home, because I don't know the numbers and the model numbers when they're like, what do you got? But I don't know.
People
I don't
ask
like
you
the
if you
feeling.
ride.
Yeah.
I could see you on.
yeah,
a
but
Harley.
Harley, yeah,
I think I'm going to go
shocked
now.
you don't.
Now I'm just going to go like my wife doesn't. My wife won't let me. I think I might. Maybe that'll just be enough.
I'm with you. In
Is that
spirit,
even a
yeah.
lie?
It's not a lie, right? It's
Yeah.
maybe by omission, but he's asking me, what do I ride? Oh, my wife won't let me anymore.
anymore.
Because the Blue Jays hat.
Man, that's the lie right there.
Yeah. The Bushman connection on the Blue Jays thing was just as simple, like, oh, my buddy's, the bullpen coach, and I've always liked the hat and whatever. And then when I was wearing it around the guys from home, they're like, what are you doing? You get an Orioles hat at home too? Not yet. No, I don't. But that was enough of a connection. And then it just opened up this floodgates. Like the St. Louis one was the only one that I'd had. I bought that one like 10 years ago just because I loved it. And I was like, whatever, who cares? And now I might have to pivot. But whenever I've tried to go something non-branded, I'm like, I don't know. It just doesn't fit as well. I like working out on them because you sweat more. And I don't wear the ones that I work out. So what the fuck am I talking about? Just shut
Really
up.
quick, we've gone on a tangent here.
Yeah.
So I recently moved, and
Congratulations.
I found a bunch of old Russillo gear. Remember those Russillo, like, they were like a cobalt blue dad hat? They were like one of my favorite merch things that we've ever had. I have like 3 of them. I also found that jukebox, that SVP and Russillo jukebox that's now has moved from attic to attic. But yeah, no, I got some like unused, like 2016 Russillo show hats, 17 maybe. But yeah.
Yeah, because there was 2 runs of those. Because then they did the black neon ones, which were aggressive, which
Those
were loud.
Yeah, I have that
They were
too.
like trucker hats.
It was just like a snapback.
Oh, was it?
I think it was just a snapback.
I thought there was maybe some mesh involved. Those didn't want to break in. I can tell you that. They didn't. And then again, I don't know that I was gonna wear my own hat around.
Yeah. See that?
Like, oh, it's really proud of yourself.
It's a good hat. Love a good dad hat.
Oh, he's showing us the hat now.
Yeah. You don't look at the screen, dude. Come on.
I was trying to find an
break
email.
this out next pod. I should have worn it today. It's on me.
Yeah,
Anyway.
break it out. I wonder what you could get for those. You get $20
Probably
for those.
way too much.
That one's a good hat. It's a good hat. I don't know. I think I have 1 box of like leftover stuff. I have a million of those green neon shirts. Those are in a box somewhere. And when I moved, I've moved how many times now? 3 times in 6 years. And the last move, you move that often, you start really asking yourself a lot of questions. Going, what are you going to do with this on the next move? Then what are you going to do? Because what's that rule?
Yeah.
If you have not used something for a year, you do not need it. Right?
Yeah, I recently went through this because my parents, they retired, they moved out of their house, and my mom's got this giant box full of just like stuff from my childhood,
Steve box?
whatever. Yeah, literally, it was a Steve box, and she's like, "Oh, like this is your christening outfit. Like, can you take it with you?" I'm like, "Mom, walk me through the next like 50 years of my life with this. It's going to go from your attic to my attic, and then my kids, when I die, are going to have to figure out what they want to do with my and it's likely going to get thrown out. So like, why don't we just skip this now and just throw it out now? Because I'm never going to open it again." She got a little upset about that. Maybe I was a little insensitive, but it's like, I don't need this.
You should have just taken it and got rid of it. I mean, you're like,
I know. Maybe I
never would have came up again. And you're just like, why don't we chuck this? It's like, oh my God.
They were like T-ball trophy. She's like, you don't want to keep this? I'm like, what? No.
T-ball. Yeah, I don't know. That's a little bridge too far. T-ball.
I think whatever the grade that was needed was an A from her for keeping her son stuff like that. But you're right. Like, I can't wait to share this with my daughter and have her be super not interested after 4 minutes.
And it's like, cool. Now it's back in the attic.
Right.
No one's ever going to see it again.
You go to your daughter when she's in high school and be like, well, then you can have it later on and share it with your kids. You're like, will I? Okay, here we go. My dad can't stop buying boats. Whoa.
Come on.
Like this guy already.
This is the podcast for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, 51, 5'9", 155, lean, mean, open water swimmer, some measure of success, state champs runner-up, early 90s JUCO water polo. I love water polo. Wouldn't be good at it. Defensive spark plug off the bench, Jose Alvarado in Speedo. Side note, 96% sure I had a Russillo in the Wild sighting during a Sunday or a sunny Friday, new era hat, Red Sox. That I did. Yeah, I was working out. And then he saw me at the ATM. Took everything I had to remain cool. Whatever. I digress. I write to you guys today after many years of diligent listening because I think you can specifically empathize with my issues. It seems like you've all got at least good, if not great, relationships with your own fathers, respectively. Anyone hate their dad?
No.
Everybody good? Okay.
Me and my stepdad are cool too. Yeah. Like,
wow.
Dad,
You got 2 dads. All right. I love my dad. Always have. And always will. He's been a better friend than father figure my whole life. He was the best man and Both my weddings has become a legendary grandfather. All that said, if he buys another fucking boat, I'm going to have his lawyer remove my name from his will. Well, why would you do that? You might
It's silly.
just
Sounds
get
awesome.
boats. Yeah, no cash. Here are your boats. My dad's into boats like the Spanish were into colonies. He's compulsively obsessed with acquiring anything that floats. His current inventory includes one pontoon boat, one
Gotta have
canoe, one inflatable kayak, 2 wooden rowboats, a laser, 2 sabots, and an Avon. He owned 2 Sea-Doos for about 6 weeks this past spring, purchased on a whim when my 9-year-old daughter mentioned in passing that jet skis are cool. It's worth
Jet
noting
skis
that my
are
dad
cool.
is 77 in remarkably good health. While he lives near the water, he does not live on the water. And sadly, he's a bit tied down at the moment, helping his dear friend navigate a valiant fight against cancer. So his time to float all these boats is very limited. As they pile up in his garage and mine, I'm realizing I'm quickly begrudgingly becoming the beneficiary of this awesome regatta. I've come to understand, with the help of long conversations with my therapist slash wife, okay, got it, that my dad is acquiring these boats in order to remain vital and relevant. For the love of God, how many boats can one man have, and how do I help him understand enough is enough? By the way, at the time of this writing, my dad informed me he's just got off the phone with a guy in Tennessee about buying his pontoon houseboat that has a very special feature. The shitter drain directly into the sea instead of into a holding tank. Help. Sorry for the long email. No, it's fine.
I mean, a couple of these boats aren't really boats, right? Like, I mean, they're boats, but it's like, yeah, he's got a canoe and 2 kayaks. Like, all right. I mean, it's like not even mentionable, really. Someone's asking you, like, what's your boating situation like?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, look, it's a lot of, we're talking major numbers here, but it's a bit like Ceruti's memorabilia box, the box of Ceruti's box of memories, maybe is what we should call it. If it's just in a box and kind of out of the way, that's not that big of a deal. So when you add the canoe and the inflatable kayak and the 2 wooden rowboats, I mean, look, this is a lot of boats, right? I mean, he just got 2 Sea-Doos. I think one of the things that always happens in life is there's a real like purchase. If you're somebody who likes to spend money, there's this purchase adrenaline where you're like, I'm doing it. Once you've convinced yourself that this thing you've been thinking about, now you've decided, you've justified, you rationalized, here's why I'm allowed to do this. The default of like, hey, if it makes you happy, it's like, yeah, buying shit makes a lot of people happy, but it's completely temporary. And then you'll end up more often than not going, why did I buy this? And all you have to do is, we've already said, move a few times. You start really second guessing everything about your purchase history and what you've prioritized. Like, did I fucking need this? Did I need another reel? Did I need backing line? How many backing lines can a guy have for his fly rods? This guy has a few. So, that might be the core of what you would want to get to here. Is you would go over, look at all the stuff, have it, sounds like it's just kind of all out and about, or it's carry over at your storage place that doesn't charge as much as storage would professionally. And that might be the way to attack it, where you go, you have a lot of stuff, Dad. Okay, you have a lot of stuff. You need to start thinking about this, or how can maybe you work with him, and it's something you kind of get to do with your dad. Be like, maybe it should be a 1 in, 1 out deal, right? From now on, treat this as a place that's at capacity. And if we're doing 1 in, you got to do 1 out.
Yeah, 3 boat max. Have to make some hard choices. Wait, he said though, he did say that like there's an issue with storage, because otherwise I'd say, like, what's the big deal if your dad likes something? I don't know, like, it's just, but if is that an issue? The storage thing is an issue?
Now, I'm not here yet, but I feel like when your parents get to a certain age, you're like, oh shit, what is he doing now? Like, I mean, my wife's grandfather's like 80 something, and every time we go see him, like, there's ladders on the roof, and it's like, I know who's on that ladder. It's this man. It's this guy. Like, it's not like that, but I wonder if you're just like, all right, he's getting closer to an age where you got to start like worrying about stuff, and maybe it's like you don't want to get to a point where he's 85 and something happens and there's actually like 6 boats you don't know about, like slip fees and things are getting repossessed, and it's like all against the estate. I think if his dad's like getting towards an age where he has to start wondering about it, but I think what Ryan said is good. Like, just have that conversation. It's like maybe 1 in, 1 out. Like, I'm involved here, not even like I'm trying to take over your what you're allowed to do
armada.
as my dad. Yeah, I'm just saying, as far as I'm concerned, in my little slice of heaven here that I live on, I've got like 2 of your boats. So I think we've got to have a serious conversation about it, just like logistically, not really like, is there something wrong with you? Why do you have so many boats?
I do like the idea of like, have you used this in the last year, 2 years, 3 years? Like, when's the last time you used both inflatable, whatever, canoes, kayaks, whatever they are? And if the answer is not good, like then you start asking him some tough questions, and he's like, yeah, you're right. Like, I don't, when am I, what's the purpose of this thing? The pontoon boat, do you use it? Like, do you like it? Do you have people on it? Doesn't sound like it. Like, is it just sitting there rotting away with like wasting value? Like, have, real numbers conversations, I guess, that could reach out to him, because maybe he just doesn't know. He just kind of buys them. He likes it. It's cool. It's around. Maybe he thinks you think it's cool. Who knows? But if you have that conversation, really sell him on why it's not the right thing to do financially, I think that's the way to go.
Maybe you get a little like eBay, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. You're going like, hey, I got a line on a guy who wants to buy a houseboat that shits directly into the ocean. Like, crazy that this just came across my path, but now you're the broker. You don't take a fee. Your fee is that there's less boats in your life. You could do that.
You always
making
have
it a problem,
boat guy. You just
set it
become
up.
like, boat
you're
realtor.
the fixer. You're the fixer. Yeah. And now, you could, instead of it's a bad thing, we got to talk about it. It's like, here's a good thing I found. You want to unload this one? I know you got one, you got a line on another one. It's a thought.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like, that could be the new hobby, is him buying them and then you selling them. And then you get to talk to your dad about it. It's like your thing that you have. So instead of him piling them up.
It all works out that you're losing money, but it's okay. It's
yeah.
fine. There's less boats.
You're spending time together in those golden years.
You're taking about a $1,000 loss on every boat, but it's okay.
Yeah. I would think that might be the motivation behind it. Like, let's start selling a few of these. Let's consolidate the armada,
Upgrades.
Yeah, and then potential upgrades. Maybe you moving 3 pieces for 2 and 2 for 1.
Yeah, could 5 boats get us something nice here?
Yeah. Because it is in his garage as well.
Yes.
So just to double check.
Okay. Yeah, I missed
looked
that.
at that again. Yeah. I don't think there's
going to be like an
else here.
apocalypse situation. All of a sudden, you're going to need boats. Like, there's going to be a flood, and it's going to like, you just told me to sell these boats. Now I need them all.
Right? You seen A Quiet Place, dude? Come on.
Yeah.
That would be crazy. Like, what's your dad do? Is he a big militia guy? No, he's a big naval prep guy.
He said the flood was coming. I don't know. I don't know what that meant, but
big on the ice caps. But then he can't explain the temperature drop in the Atlantic this summer. Scientists are befuddled. Just constantly on Nat Geo trying to figure it out. Okay.
There we go.
Something a little different. An adult star works out at my gym. What's up? Love the pod. I wish the life advice segment was longer. Also, shout out to nephew Kyle in all of Hudson Valley. I'm a Trinity Pauling alum and spent a lot of time in Poughkeepsie.
Nice. That's good news.
One of my
hear
cousins
that.
teaches there, actually. Nice.
Wow. You guys are locked into the area.
Yeah.
I want to reach out and gather your input on a unique situation I find myself. Due to unforeseen circumstances, I quit my job. I am now unemployed, not sure what to do with this newfound freedom on my hands. I decided that I should better myself and work out more frequently. Let's finally get that 6-pack. I've been putting my Equinox, 6-pack's made in the kitchen, brother. Just so you know. I've been putting my Equinox membership to good use, go 5 days a week. So usually I work around 9:30, 10 a.m. As you might imagine, it's pretty dead. Mostly housewives and retirees. However, being where he is located, which is not hard to figure out, I do happen to occasionally see a minor celebrity or two. They're younger, around my age, late 20s, early 30s. Lists led me to deduce that if the only people I see around my age when I go to the gym are celebrities, it's not too much of a stretch for these people to assume I am either rich, I'm not, or someone who works in the entertainment industry. One person that I've noticed recently happens to work out in the adult entertainment industry. You can imagine my surprise when I looked up and saw a woman in person who happened to be in my computer mere hours ago.
Nice.
Whoa.
Hear ya.
Before the gym, dude. She works out alone, and I may or may not have caught her checking me out in the mirror, I choose to believe. With that being said, I have a 2-pronged question to the group. One, if the opportunity presents itself, do I say something to said entertainer? If so, do I lean into I'm at Equinox on a Tuesday at 10 a.m. I'm doing pretty fucking good in life, or just go with I'm unemployed. All right. Well, you're trying to go somewhere that it's going to be pretty challenging, man. It's going to be pretty challenging just in general. So if it makes you feel better to at least just throw it out there that
Whoa.
you want to see, like, if there's any way to build a conversation around this. Look, I think there's two ways of looking at it. One, you being the next guy that tells her that you're a fan does not make you special. Okay. But I also think my assumption would be someone from that world is so desensitized to so many things that, like, a normie wouldn't be sensitized to, that she may just really appreciate the feedback and think it's totally, like, normal and like, hey, what a nice thing to hear from somebody today, because she's in this world where all those inhibitions and all the holdups that most of us would have day-to-day society, like, it's just a different world. All right. It's a different operating procedure. So I would refrain, though, from being, like, overzealous about your fandom. Overzealous. Like, I wouldn't say what you just said in the email. Like, hey, look at you here, you again. Right. And kind of like, huh? Get it. So you could, I think I think you going up to her, pretending that you don't know who she is. If you're going to, because it sounds like you're determined to do this. So who are we to tell you to, no, have less confidence? Don't do that. That's not the messaging of this. If you're going to say something, be like, hey, just before you might assume that I'm really crushing it and can come to the gym in the middle of the day, I'm actually unemployed. Brad, nice to meet you.
That's a high risk, high reward.
Yeah, what do you
option
think?
On the Oregon Trail. That's for sure. That's definitely a path.
Can we go left?
It's definitely a path. Yeah.
I probably have the least amount of celebrity interactions out of us three, but in my limited,
that's how do you have less than Ceruti? He lives in Glastonbury.
Well, I mean, he was going into ESPN, the car washes. I don't know, producing shows. Maybe I think he's just been doing it long.
Van Dyke home for Christmas.
But
yeah, that's right.
I just, whatever. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm second. But I would still, if I had to bet, I'd say Ceruti probably had more interactions than me. But what I've learned in my limited interactions is don't even bring it up. Don't bring it up at all, especially if they're not really sure who the fuck you are. Like, just be a normal person. I feel like celebrities are happier in those things when it's just like, oh, we're two people in a place, and not like a guy who's dying to ask me about that movie from 2008 or whatever. So I would stick to that. And then when you're talking about, your whole, like, you're assuming a lot that we're even getting to, like, where she wants to know what you do for work. But I'd just say put on the Harley shirt and omit. Wife won't let me ride. You know what I mean? Like, no one has to know that you don't own a bike. No one has to know that you are looking for work. I think you just omit, maybe a little vague. So I would just treat it normal and don't jump to your employment status.
Yeah, buy, a little bit of crypto and just say you're into crypto trading. It's not a lie.
Have you seen Mintcoin?
Yeah, this is what I do. It sounds
free
cool.
Tip.
I would not. I would
say anything.
Not say no. Well, I would not. I wouldn't be like, "Hey, what's up?"
Me neither.
Or any
I don't think I
would.
would.
Situations. But
yeah,
you're right. I think it sounds like he is. Can you just act like it's a normal gym encounter? If she gave you kind of like the eyes and you think there's something kind of there, just talk to her. Like, it doesn't have to be like, hey, I know you. You're in the adult film industry. Just be like, hey, I'm Rick. What's up? Notice you're really good on the power plate. I don't know, whatever.
Eagles.
Yeah, I'm just trying to stay out of trouble here. I don't understand why you have to, like, bring it up right away that you know who she is from this thing, because I'd imagine that's probably a turnoff for her. She probably gets that all the time. It's probably annoying. And I don't think there's even that many good ways that you can get in with that, unless, like, there's something that you guys think I'm missing. But I don't know how you can be like, hey, big fan. And then she's like, oh yeah, cool, thanks, man. I don't know. She's at the gym. I feel like you kind of have to play it like you don't know who she is, and then eventually you can be like, oh yeah, of course I know who you were. If you actually get more friendly with her.
I also think there's a really good chance she will have developed knowing who knows what she does versus just a guy coming up to talk to a cute girl at the gym.
I don't know, though.
Okay?
I don't know.
Guys
She's
like withering around her all the time.
It's different. Like, if people are looking at you or Bill, they're like, I know that guy from sports. But if they're looking at a girl,
not because we're hot,
they could just, I don't know. Bill's got those blue eyes, and I don't know. You're pretty strong, but I think a lot of times when dudes are looking at you, I feel bad for Bill, because when people, like, they're not sure, so they always look angry. So if I'm, like, walking somewhere with Bill, there's a guy who's, like, confused, staring. But
yeah, the
dude's confused
right.
face actually look a little, like, unhappy. So they look like they're grilling him. They're like, "Are you that guy from whatever. But I think for girls, like dudes just oogle girls all the time. So it could all be a wash. How could you
Or
tell?
ogle. Yeah. So I think I don't know. I know what you're saying, but like to the same degree, like Bill can see when somebody's looking at him without the person realize that he's looking at him. Okay. He has developed that over the course of his lifetime of like where the other person thinks they're being covert, and it's covert's too strong of a word, but like the person making the face doesn't understand this face that they're making. Did someone just fart face where it's like, what the hell's going on there? Like, and that's the face of anybody that is in the public eye. Like you have developed distinguishing the confusion recognition face that the person doesn't even realize that they're making. So unless our emailer here is just, creamy peanut butter, you've got to figure that he'll probably have a tell.
Yeah.
He'll probably have a tell. And I would say if you actually just want to introduce her, say hello, see if there's any connection there, I would go out of your way to make sure you don't have that tell.
Yeah, practice in the mirror, buddy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, practice in the mirror. Little De Niro stuff here. Like, yeah. I mean, just going to have to make up things like, oh, are you done? Are you done with that? Yeah, I was going to use it next. Oh, no problem. No, I can switch it up. I'm super malleable. Nice to meet you. Okay. Let us know how that goes.
Yeah.
That'll do it. That'll do it for the show today. Thank you to Wargon, live Pennsylvania Wargon, and Kyle and Steve. Check out our YouTube page. We'll have some new stuff up next week. We'll do the quarterback. NBA guys are going to get the jump on it right out of the gates, and then maybe even update it middle of the season. So we'll be doing that just on YouTube. And please subscribe to the podcast. Ryen Russillo, Ringer, Spotify.